Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Brad, and welcome to week 5 of the book report. It's already February, which is crazy. I can't believe it's already 31 days into the year, 32 days into the year, whatever it is. January just flew by. Felt like it was just a blink and I missed it. But I'm glad that the snow is finally melting. We have a little bit here and there, but for the most part, the snow is gone. It's warmed up a little bit. It's probably going to be one of those fall springs where in a week or two it's going to be freezing cold again. For now, I'm glad January's over and the cold weather and the snow. But man, it flew by really quick. I guess that's what happens when you start to get old. Time goes by a lot quicker. But since it is February now, I'll talk about my June reading wrap up this week. Everything I read in June, which was a really good month for me. A lot of people read like 117 books in a month, which is awesome for them. Cool, but that's not me. I'll never get anywhere near that. I finished up 6 books in January, which was a really strong reading month for me. A lot of shorter books, but books nonetheless. So we'll talk about that. The last two, I think one I had started last week and finished up, and then the last one I started this week and finished it up last night. Actually, finished it up last night. So we'll talk about those, and then what I'm currently reading, what I'm planning to read next. Maybe I don't know. I'm kind of in one of those moods where I don't know what I want to read next. I have too many options. Does anybody else have that problem? You have too many options. You don't know what to pick from. I do that a lot with movies as well. We'll sit down and watch a movie, and instead of picking a movie, we'll just scroll through Netflix for 15 minutes and then end up going to bed because we don't know what to pick. Anyway, we're going to talk about some books. These are the 6 books I finished in January. I think they're in order the way I read them. If not, it doesn't really matter too much. But so first up, I know I did finish First West by Carrie Davies. And I'll talk about each of these briefly because I have talked about them in previous episodes of the book report weeks prior. West by Carrie Davies, I thought overall was good. I wish it was longer, but it's kind of the story about a father and daughter. The father hears about this discovery of these ancient bones in Kentucky, and his imagination runs wild about what these creatures might be. And he sets off on this solo expedition in search of trying to find these creatures if they're still roaming the world out west. He's in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. He's in Pennsylvania somewhere and heads out west in search of these creatures and ends up leaving his daughter behind with his sister. So the story sort of flips back and forth perspectives from the daughter being left at home with her aunt, which she didn't really much care for, and then the dad out on his expedition in search of these giant creatures that he hopes are still roaming the wilds. Like I said, overall it was good. I wish it was longer. I wish it went into more detail about his expedition and stuff. But overall, it was pretty good. I did enjoy it. Next up is The Jewel and Her Lapidary by Fran Wilde. This is part of at least a trilogy. I know there's 3 books. And this one it was okay. It's super short. I don't even think it's 90 pages. It's like 85 pages long. I think that's my main issue I had with it. It was just too short for me to really care about what was going on or get invested in the characters and whatnot. What was here was pretty good. It is kind of like a medieval fantasy, but it's set in what I imagined. It doesn't say this, but like Eastern culture. So like based on Japanese or Chinese culture. That's kind of the aesthetic I was imagining with this. The Jewels are like the royal family, and then the Lapidaries are kind of their advisors, their assistants, their helpers, and they have these powers where they're able to speak with these different types of gemstones and sort of channel different energies through those to calm you down or put you to sleep or kind of control you and what your intentions are and stuff like that. And at the beginning of the book, there's this assassination. It's not a spoiler. It happens at the very beginning. The royal family's being assassinated. There's a traitor. They're kind of letting in this enemy army. And it was all cool and stuff, but like I said, it was so short, I really didn't get attached to any of the characters or invested in what was going on. It was a cool world, a potentially cool magic system. I just wish there was more to it. Like I said, there are other books in the series. I don't know if I'll go on with those because I don't think they take place right after this one. I think it's just other stories set in this world. So I don't know if I'll continue on because I wasn't that invested, but it had the potential. It was just, for me, in my opinion, it was way too short for that type of story to get into the world building and the magic system for me to really care. That one was okay. That one was The Jewel and Her Lapidary by Fran Wilde. I finished up this. It was the Spinebreakers book club pick for the first quarter of 2025, which was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was super fun, super entertaining. The movie is one of my all-time favorite movies. If I had to place it somewhere in the top five, I would say I've seen it a bunch of times. And the book, for the most part, it follows the same main beats. They're bioengineering dinosaurs, brought them back to life. There's an island with a theme park on there. People go there, dinosaurs escape, and bad things happen. And other than that, though, it was surprisingly different than the movie, quite drastically different. There's entire plot points in here that aren't in the movie whatsoever. A lot of the characters' appearances or ages are different than the movie. Some of their motivations are quite different than they were in the movie. The deaths are not all the same as they were in the movie. So if you've read the movie and you're maybe thought about reading the book, but you're like, oh, it's going to be just a rehash of the movie, it's definitely not. Like I said, it hits the same basic plot points. But there's so much more and so much other things going on in here that were not in the movie whatsoever. Like there's a scene in here that is actually the opening from the second movie, The Lost World. Is actually from the first book. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you like Jurassic Park, I would highly suggest you check this one out. It is different enough that you will get some enjoyment out of it, and it won't feel like you're rewatching the movie in word format. Jurassic Park, it was super fun and super entertaining. And it was more, some parts of it, not the whole thing, but some parts of it were definitely more of kind of a horror vibe, a horror aesthetic, especially at the beginning of the book where people don't know there's dinosaurs yet. They're kind of, something's going on. Really fun. And I am planning to read The Lost World, the second book, sometime this year. I read it a long, long time ago. I don't remember anything about it. But the way certain things that happen in Jurassic Park, I'm curious now to go back and read The Lost World, because it's got to be a completely different plot line than what happens in the movie because of certain things that happen. But anyway, Jurassic Park was a lot of fun, super entertaining, and shockingly different than the movie was. Next up, I read Scanlines by Todd Keisling. I joked before about this one being like the feel-good hit of the summer when this originally came out. It is by no, and that's super sarcasm. This is by no means a feel-good book. It's super dark, and depending on what your triggers are, it might be super depressing and stuff. But it's basically about this haunted, cursed, I don't know what you'd call it, video. So there's these teenage boys, and they're looking to download some inappropriate movies off the internet, and they download it, and it turns out what they got was not what they were wanting. It is this video of this senator who is having this like live broadcast, this live press conference, and ends up committing suicide during that. And that's the video recording they watch, and it ends up really haunting them, really messing with them. And I read the author's note in here, and Todd described it as kind of like after they watch the video, they start seeing the senator's face everywhere. It's kind of in their dreams. They see it on other people. They see it hanging out in their window. And Todd was kind of describing that as like the physical manifestation of depression, where if you're kind of in that state, you kind of see it everywhere, wherever you look, in your dreams, on other people. So that was an interesting way to look at it, an interesting interpretation of depression and how it can be kind of all-consuming, and you see it wherever you look. But yeah, this is a really dark story, but I really enjoyed it. I like the dark, twisted kind of stuff. I like Todd's stuff. This is the third book I've read of his. I've enjoyed everything. I've read Devil's Creek and his collection, Cold, Dark, and Infinite, and both of those are really good. This one's super short. I read this, I think over 2 days, but if I sat down and just a couple hours, it's like just a little over 100 pages. Really dark, really fun. Not fun. Fun's not the right word. I say fun a lot. It was entertaining and dark, and I enjoyed it. This was Scanlines by Todd Keisling. Next up, I finished Pineville Trace by Wes Blake. This is a Kentucky author. This one I really dug as well. It is sort of about, it's like a very introspective novel. There's not really much plot to it, and I say that as a good thing, not a bad thing, but it's about this guy. His name's Frank, and he used to be this like Southern revival preacher, kind of a con man in a way, saying he would heal people when he really wasn't doing that. But he's gone to prison, and he escapes along with his cat named Buffalo, and they just kind of go on this journey of him trying to Frank trying to find himself, who he really is, what he really wants out of life, what he believes in, that kind of thing. I dug it. I really dig the cover on there as well. I kind of like this collage of things. But yeah, this one was fun. If you're looking for just kind of a story about a dude's life and what he is thinking about and what his kind of hopes and dreams are and his aspirations and him trying to kind of soul search and find those things, this is kind of something you'd want to pick up. I enjoyed this one as well, Pineville Trace by Wes Blake. And now this next book, this is what I think I had started reading last week and finished it since that last video. And this is my first 5-star read of the year. I loved it. And this is Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. Dennis Lehane might now be a new favorite author for me. I'm going to have to go and pick up all of his stuff and read it. That's how much I really love this book. Like I said, first 5-star read of the year. It's set in the 1970s. I want to say 1974. Yeah, 74 during the summer in Boston. And this is during the time, there's a lot of racial tensions. And this is the time where they're trying to desegregate their school system. So they've kind of incorporated this busing idea where they're going to, the new school year, I think it's just high school starting out. They're going to bus high school students from the black high school in the black neighborhood to the white school. And then some of the students from the white school bus them over to the black neighborhood and the black school to start desegregating and intermingling the races in the school system. And that, of course, is met with a ton of backlash, riots and protests and things like that. And that's kind of the backdrop. A lot of tension going on that summer leading up to the start of the school year. And then the kind of catalyst that kicks off the story is a young black man ends up being found dead in the white side of town. His name was Augie Williamson. And then a young white girl named Jules, she ends up going missing around that very same time. And we're following her mother trying to find out what happened to her. Her name's Mary Pat. And then also following one of the detectives who is trying to figure out what happened to Augie Williamson, if it was an accident, if he was murdered, whatever it is. There's some local crime, some like organized crime in here as well, mixed in with all these racial tensions and everything. And I loved it. My favorite thing about it was the dialogue. He writes dialogue better than a lot of the authors I've ever read. It felt really just real and authentic. I'm sure you've seen movies like Gone Baby Gone, which is one of his, or like The Town. They have that kind of that Boston accent, that dialect, and he captured that so well. I think he is from Boston, Dennis Lehane. I've never been to Boston, but I felt like I was in Southie in Boston just listening to these people have conversations. It was really authentic, and I think writing true authentic dialogue is hard to do. He did it exceptionally well in this book. That was one of my favorite parts of it, the authentic dialogue. This is Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. First 5-star read of the year. If you're into crime, kind of historical fiction kind of stuff, this is set in the 70s about a real issue they had desegregating the schools in. Highly suggest you check it out. I'm definitely going to be picking up more of Lehane's books. And then this is the final book I read. This is one I actually bought last week and read it over this week. It's super short. This is The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. I've never read anything by him before. I know probably his most popular book is Rosemary's Baby, which now that I've read this, I definitely want to read that as well. I did know the twist, I guess you could say, in here already. I've never seen the movie, but just it's kind of a pop culture thing. I kind of knew what was going to happen. Although once I've read it now, I don't know if that thing that I thought was happening actually did happen, if that makes any sense. So basically it is this family, Joanna and her husband, Walter, and their kids, Pete and Kim. They moved to this neighborhood, Stepford, and it's kind of like the quintessential American town. Everyone's got their lawns cut and the white picket fences, and, the wives are in the kitchen cooking and cleaning, all that stuff like it was back in, I don't know when this takes place, the 70s maybe? But this is around the time where it was like, women's rights. Yeah, this 1972 is when it was written. So it's really about, women doing their own thing and wanting to not just only be wives and moms and doing house chores all the time. following their own dreams. Joanna, she's a photographer in here. There's another lady in here, Ruth Ann, who's like a children's author and stuff. But all the wives in Stepford are basically, just one mindset. I got to clean. I got to cook. I got to take care of the family. And it's very weird. As you're reading it, there's feels off. Something's off about it. And then the main character, Joanna, I don't want to give anything away, but she comes up with this theory about what she thinks is actually happening to these women to change them into these kind of automatons in a way where, they only do one thing. And then you get to the end of the book and you never really find out what exactly happens. Or I take that back. You kind of know what is happening, but you don't know how it happens. And it's kind of left up to the reader's assumptions to go along with her theory. And is her theory correct in what is going on? And is that what's happening? Or is it maybe something else? And I kind of like that. The ending is a little bit ambiguous, left to the reader's interpretation as to not what is going on, but how the thing is happening that's kind of changing these women. And I think I agree with Joanna's theory. I think that's what's going on. I think that's kind of the popular thing. I think that's what they do in the movie as well. I haven't seen it, but I think that's how they do it in the movie. This was good. Like I said, this was kind of about women's rights and women's liberation and doing their own thing, and the men kind of subtly rebelling against that. It's not outright forthcoming, but the machinations in the background is kind of what's going on to kind of hold that at bay. But this was The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. I definitely want to also read Rosemary's Baby now that I've read that. That one was pretty good as well. So that's my January wrap up with the W's. January wrap up. All the 6 books I read in January. So what am I currently reading? So last year I started the audiobook last year, early in the year, I listened to on audiobook Stephen King's On Writing, which I loved. It was one of my 5-star reads from last year. And I liked it so much, I picked up his other nonfiction book on audio, Danse Macabre. There was a new edition that came out last year in October, and I picked it up. I listened to it a little bit last year and kind of put it aside. And I started again this week, picked it back up because I had some time to listen to some audiobooks. So I've been listening to that. I'm a little over halfway through of Danse Macabre, and it's okay so far. It's nowhere near as enjoyable, at least for me, as On Writing was. I think the main thing about On Writing I liked was Stephen King was narrating it, which really lent to my enjoyment of it, him telling his own story, in his own voice. But Danse Macabre is more kind of a like educational look at horror and what makes horror and things like that. And it's more like listening to a professor teach a college course about it. He's talking about all different kinds of things, movies, books, radio dramas, all kinds of different stuff. And, the essence of what makes horror is kind of what he's talking about. He's going through the movies and stuff. A lot of the movies are older ones that I've never watched from like the 50s and 60s and stuff. But it is enjoyable, but more like listening to a college professor lecture on horror than anything. But I am listening to it. I will finish it up. It is enjoyable enough for me to continue on, but nowhere near as good as On Writing was for me, in my opinion, at least so far with what he's talking about. He hasn't got to the books yet. He's still talking about a lot of the older movies and stuff. But yeah, I'm listening to Danse Macabre by Stephen King on audiobook. And then also last week I started Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I didn't get super far into it. I'm on page 59, starting on chapter 9. But I'm enjoying this one so far. I can tell that this one's going to end up being, a gut punch, one of those emotional books that just punches you right in the gut, rips your heart out. We're following this little boy. It feels like he is older now, and he's kind of writing about, what has happened to him in his life is kind of the storytelling device, how it's structured, I believe. But he's a young guy. He lives in Appalachia with his mom, who is a druggie. She's been in and out of rehab. His dad died before he was even born, or right when he was born. He doesn't really remember his dad at all. The mom ends up marrying this biker dude who's just not a good guy. He's abusive. And that's about where we are so far. I'm enjoying it. The writing's really good, and I can tell this is going to end up probably breaking my heart by the end of it. But yeah, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So far, so good. It's like Appalachian grit lit kind of stuff, which is a genre I'm really into. Kind of like David Joy. This would be something similar to David Joy's work. If you read his stuff, this is similar in vein. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I'm going to try to finish this one up this week. We'll see how far I get. I don't know. It is a bigger book. It's about 550 pages, so about 500 pages left. We'll see how far I get into it. Hope to get it done this week. If not, we'll see. But Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And then after that, once I get that done, I don't know what I want to read. Like I said, it's too many options. I don't know what to pick. So we'll see what my mood is by the time I get done with that. But one thing I do know I'm going to read later on in the year. I was talking with Cliff from Cliff's Dark Gems, and he was talking about in June he's going to read Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry for part of the, I think it's the Home on the Range read along, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think later in June we're going to buddy read this together. Lonesome Dove. This is, I think, my most anticipated read of the year. I'm really excited to get to this one. Everyone I've heard talk about it just says how it's amazing and it's one of their favorite books of all time. So I'm super excited to get to it, but also just a tiny bit trepidatious that there is so much hype behind it. I'm worried I'm not going to like it or it's going to be a letdown. Hopefully not. I don't think it's going to be, since everyone seems to just absolutely love this book. So I'm really excited for this one. This one's, like I said, I'm going to buddy read this one with Cliff later on this year in June. So I've got that to look forward to. And like I said, this is my most anticipated read for the year. So we'll see what comes up. But after Demon Copperhead, I don't know what I'm going to get into. So maybe you'll find out next week if I finish up Demon Copperhead or read something else along the way. We'll see. But I think that's all I got for you guys today. So appreciate you hanging out, spending your time with me. Again, my name is Brad, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.